Hi, welcome to Module 3. This module, we will be looking at the perceptions of childhood and the evolution of the fairy tale, the oral form of the fairy tales, most specifically. The learning objectives of this module are to reprise the movement from the oral form to the written text, which is, quite a shift. And then we're going to look at or begin to understand how folk tales and fairy tales are complex literary creations that were never really specifically targeted to children as they are now in our age. We're going to apply a variety of critical theories to the reading of the folk and fairy tales, and we're going to start to integrate the social context of class with the societal function of the folk and the fairy tale. And that's quite important as we move through this course, is to see that function. Primarily, we're going to be moving beyond the complexities of the study of the tale and to begin to look more closely at the audience. Who is listening to this? Who are these tales created for? You're going to understand or begin to discover that the idea of childhood as a distinct phase of human development is a relatively modern idea that postdates the creation and dissemination of oral tales in pre-literate cultures all over the world. Well, what does that mean? Essentially, it means that we have to start looking at tales through a different lens, right? We all see fairy tales as creations for children, specifically for children. And yet, when these oral tales were originally created, they were not targeted to children. There was no language and no concept of childhood as a distinct phase of human development. Now, as hard as that may seem be for you to believe, you will begin to see that indeed that is so. It wasn't until probably around the 17th century, maybe 18th century, that they started to have inklings that children had distinct emotional and psychological, I wouldn't say psychological, but distinct emotional developmental phases that were somewhat different than adults, right? Hitherto, they've been seen as just miniature versions of adults. And you'll read a bit more in depth about this and these ideas. By the 19th century, of course, suddenly there was a complete understanding that children were distinctly separate from adults, that they had to be taught differently, and that they indeed had to be shaped to fit into the society that they lived in. So you'll be looking at tales in an entirely new light, right? You'll be looking at the function of the tales in an entirely new light. And you'll begin to ask yourselves, who are these stories created for? Who are they told to? And you'll begin to tease out the many layers of the folk tale and the fairy tale. Because by the time these tales become written, they start to change, and the audience starts to change, and children start to begin to be targeted specifically. But in their original state, you'll find that most of these tales, children would have heard them because they would have been present in the groups that were listening to these tales. They were never shielded or separated out the way they are in modern society. So you will have quite a few things to read this time, and we'll begin to read some fairy tales, which of course I'm sure you'll enjoy. And that's it really for Module 3.